have my final draft of my natural disaster rainbow scratch art paper, and you can see that right now I'm looking at my volcano photo reference, and I have it right here on my laptop. So I have it right next to me as I'm working. And you can see that I've blocked out the major parts of my artwork so far. So what I'm looking for in my photo is the basic shape of my volcano. And the next thing that I'm looking for is any area where I see a highlight or a white part of my picture, basically. I'm looking for my lightest values. So I'm really using this picture to help me. You can also use this. If you use the negative photo, you should be looking at all the areas that are in black, because those are going to represent the marks that you make. I'm gonna look at this one, whichever one works easiest for you. So I am looking at my photo, and I know that I have my volcano shape drawn, and I drew a line where I noticed any major difference between something that was light and something that was dark, or any kind of tonal shift. So now what I'm gonna do, and I have this extra rainbow scratch paper from my earlier draft. That way I can practice my marks on here before I make them on my final draft. So I'm gonna focus, I think, on the parts of my volcano that are the lightest right now, and that is my lava. So I know that right here is really, really light, and I have that shape right there that I can carve into my rainbow scratch art. So I'm gonna do that right now. Very carefully cleaning off the point of my carving tool as I go. That way it's nice and neat. And I am taking my time down. And I'm taking my time because I can't erase. There's this little shape of white right here, so I'm going to clear this area out of all of the black coating. So this is essentially, I'm moving my hand in the same way that I would be if I were, this line comes up even further. Coloring with high quality. So moving really slowly, really taking my time getting that shape right. Really looking at my photograph. Has this little circle of black right there. All right, so now that I've kind of sketched out that whole shape, so I've made my mark, I know that everything in this area, from this line right here up to this line, is going to be really, really bright. It's one of the brightest parts of my photograph. So now I have to figure out what kind of mark I'm going to make. My favorite mark I love to make is cross hatching, where you draw these diagonal lines that basically intersect. And you can see the more lines that I add, the lighter that area is going to appear, because I'm removing that black coat that's over the rainbow. But, because I want my work to look nice and neat, I'm going to put my lines, I think, and also because of the angle of this, I'm gonna scratch, vertical lines first. Not a lot, just a couple across to make sure that I'm taking my time. I'll really scratch this line out a little bit more so that I can, because we still want to see some of that cross-hatching texture. Okay, now here I want to be really careful because this spot needs to stay black because there's a shadow right there in my photograph. All right, so now I'm going to start to add really narrow scratches. I'm barely pressing with my tool, really lightly. Ooh, this sound kind of bugs my ears, but it looks really cool and it's really relaxing to just draw these lines over and over again. So now I'm going to flip my paper this way and I'm going to add my cross marks so that I have lines that cross. And I'm barely pressing, I'm moving slowly, I'm not pressing hard. You don't need to have really wide lines for this. I can have narrow lines. But I gotta be careful of my shadow right there. I almost drew right through it. It wouldn't be the world's biggest deal, but I really like that there's that little spot of contrast in this really light part of my illustration. There we go. I can do this one. Make sure I clean off my scratching tools so that it's easier for me to scratch and brush off any dust. I'm gonna just really, this line is not as nice and neat as I want it to be. There we go. It's a little nicer and neater. Now that I know that that line is correct, can really make sure that I go back in and press harder. Make this line just a little bit thicker so it's a clear boundary between a darker area of my illustration and a lighter area. That creates contrast to have that. Oops. Well, now I'm gonna have to make this bigger because my hand moved too much, so now I'll have to just make that smidge bigger. All right, I'm gonna leave that like that for now, and then I think that I wanna work on my other area of really, really light value in my photograph. And this is the lava that's flowing down the edge of the volcano. So to create, so this is also lava right here, but it's going up in the air. So I really like how the directional lines are going up and they're really straight up. So it kind of draws the eyes up. So now I'm going to create a different illusion of this lava flowing. So I'm going to follow like an echo drawing this line down the edge of my volcano. And I'll add another one right here. Just kind of wavy lines down so it looks like the lava is flowing, and then maybe that line intersects. Maybe this line intersects. This one too. So it really creates the illusion of flowing down the hill. And remember, the more lines we have, the lighter this area is gonna look. So I'm gonna add some more flowing, intersecting lines. I wanna make sure that all of my lines look nice and neat though. So I overdrew that line so you can see I have a little bit that's extending behind the bottom of my shape. So I'm gonna make this line a little thicker. That way, and I just discovered if you scratch too hard, it will go to the paper underneath the rainbow. So be very careful with that. And these lines are still just kind of, they're not attached to anything. So I'm gonna attach them to that bottom line. And I'm going to continue to do that until this area is as light or appears as light as this area, because remember, they're both sections that are showing lava. And every so often, I'm going to switch directions and also make sure to clean off my tool and the dust off my paper. And I'm moving my artwork as I go so that it's easier for me to draw nice, neat lines. And also I get a different look at my artwork to see if there's something that I might add or something that might be different at a different angle. It's always helpful to look at your artwork from different perspectives. So I really like this because it has that contrast. It still has that little bit of the black coating and it still has the rainbow. So that really creates a really cool visual effect. I really like that. Here we go. All right. So there's one lava line down. I'm gonna work up here in the sky because I notice it has this really cool pattern with all these kind of white squiggles. So I know that there's another area right here that is going to stay really dark. So I'm gonna sketch that out first so that I know that that's where I'm gonna stop my pattern that's up here. It's kind of like my dividing section between two different line patterns. And then up here, we just have all of this swirling, whirling lines. Kind of remind me almost of Starry Night a little bit. And I'm gonna make some of these a little bit bigger and some of them a little bit more narrow. So we have a variety of widths, variety of all kinds of lines. Some of these lines are attached, so I see some go like this. Really creates a sense of movement in the air, which I really think is cool. Also notice that there's a really strong, solid line of black right here along the edge of the smoke. So I'm gonna really make sure that I block that off because I know that that's where I wanna stop my pattern. All right, so I can really keep adding as many of these lines as I'd like up until this line right here and this line down here. I'm gonna turn this because I think it's gonna be easier for me to get this corner. Maybe I want some circles in there, some little dots. Put this. Really taking my time. Okay, so there are tons of lines in this space, but we have 2 weeks to work on this until it's due, so we can take as long as we need to make sure that our lines are just the way we want them to be. So I'm gonna keep doing this. And again, just remember we're going to, so right underneath there's a little bit of a white space. I'm gonna kind of chunk that off, block it off. And I know that I'm gonna need to add a lot of lines in this place because it's really, really light. So I'm also thinking about Elizabeth Catlett's work and her use of lines. So I used cross hatches over here. Ooh, I wanna add another line right there. That was a big space that could use another line there. So I want to switch up my mark. Instead of doing cross hatching or these line patterns, I notice in my artwork that this part has more horizontal lines. It looks more like this. So I'm going to carve, scratch these horizontal like lines. Ooh, and I love that transition from the blue to the orange to the red, because blue and orange are complementary colors. And I did not plan that, I didn't know it was like that, but what a cool transition from one color to another. And I'm gonna add just some tinier dots, not dots, excuse me, lines in there, dashes, to make it lighter, because it is a light section of my photograph. Sure that these go right to that line, and I kind of overdrew again, so I gotta fix that, smooth that line out. Fantastic. This might be my favorite part that I've done so far, is this area, just because of the color coincidence for this highlight. I want to leave some of the blacks, so now I have to really carefully just add these lines in so I don't scratch all of it away. So it's creating kind of a contrast in texture. It's creating a contrast in lines. Lines are different kinds of lines. So we have that variety that's just going to make it look really visually interesting. All right, great, so I think that that's a great start. I'm gonna keep going, scratching out all the different highlights in the lighter areas that I can see in my photograph, switching up the kinds of marks or lines I'm making so that we have that contrast, and making sure that everything looks nice and neat. All right, guys, I am so excited to see your final drafts, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, friends.